Thank you, Lisa. And hello, everybody. I just want to make sure that you want to be happy. Anybody who want to be happy, raise your hand, make some noise. I just wanted to make sure that you are not in for something that you are not signed up for. All right. So let us begin with a quick question or a survey. So we all want to be happy. Suppose there is a unit of measurement for happiness. Think of any unit, like you measure groceries in pounds, your milk in gallons. Think of a unit, cook up something if you don't know one. So how much unit of happiness, how happy you want to be? This much, this much, this much. How much happiness you are looking for? Unlimited happiness, right? Okay, so suppose you are granted happiness to the measure of your unit of happiness. How long you want to be happy? For a few seconds, for a few minutes, for the whole day, forever. Okay, so we agree on 2 points. Anybody disagrees? No? So we want unlimited happiness. We want to be happy forever. Happily ever after. Everybody heard that phrase, right? Okay, so we want to be happy and happily ever after. Now this is what I want to request to you. Anything that you hear today, I want you in your mind to challenge every assertion and every statement and do not take it on face value. Because it's very important to deal about happiness. You want to be happy, and I very seriously respect and value your time and trust that you are investing in this class. Everything that I am going to share today, I have learned it from my Gurudev, YugaRishi, Vedmurti, Pandit Shriram Sharma Acharya. So now you know the content, the authority of the content from where it is coming from. Everything that I will be discussing with you, it is developed in Vedic thought. It is coming from Hindu tradition, from the land of India. There are two greatest countries in the world today, as I know of. India, of course, where I am born, not because I am born there, but because that is the country where the discovery of happiness and discovery of the laws of happiness took place. And of course, second greatest country is my adopted home, which is founded for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The only thing I am a little puzzled about the choice of the word pursue by the authors of the Declaration of Independence. Because I use the word discovery of happiness in the Indian context, and here we are talking about the pursuit of happiness. These are two different verbs, pursue and discover, as far as happiness is concerned. Keep that in the back of your head when we discuss this topic. Well, so now you know the content, the authority of the content, the source, tradition. It is coming from, of course, Hindu tradition, Vedic tradition, everything that you are going to hear today. But that does not mean that it is limited to the people who subscribe to that tradition or to that faith. Like laws of motion discovered by Newton, theory of relativity discovered by Einstein. You have recently heard of big news about the Higgs boson, as Mr. Bose, after whom the boson element is known. So these discoverers does not really make them these discoveries as a Christian or as a Jewish or a Hindu knowledge. It is a knowledge that is applicable to the universal mankind, because everybody wants to be happy. Alright, so with that preface, we know that we all want to be happy for unlimited time and unlimited quantity. Now, when you want to begin to be happy? Tomorrow? Right now. So we want to be happy right now, right here, or somewhere else. Right here, here and now. Here is now is the key to be happy. You don't want to wait until you reach to some place, sometime in future, and until you make it there, you are just in the waiting room called world. Right? You don't want to be waiting. We want to do something about it. We want to take control of our life and happiness as a matter of life. Alright, so let us start now. with the notion of work. Everybody is kind of perpetually in a action. They're all working. We are all working. Something is driving us to work. And Vedanta thinks that, Vedantic thought basically informs us that the motivation for all actions, all work that we do is happiness. The happiness that we want is basically motivating us to keep working. And now what happens? Vedanta also informs us that the highest reality that you can think of is an aspect, or happiness is an aspect of that highest reality. Alright? But despite all our hope that we want to be happy, hope is not a strategy. We cannot be happy just by hoping that we want to be happy. We have to discover why we are not happy. What is stopping us to be happy? Well, if you think, you will find that there are certain limitations of the natural world, phenomenal world in which we live. The very first limitation of this world in which we live is that there is not enough knowledge. There is ignorance. We do not understand everything about the environment, about the world in which we live. Means forget about everything else outside. We do not even know how our mind works. So ignorance is one factor that stops us, keeps us from being happy. Another thing is that, is there anybody in this room who never gets tired? We all get tired. Even the biggest athletes in Olympic get tired and sweating. So that tells us that we are powerless. We don't have enough power to keep enjoying life, to be happy as much as we want to be. So that notion that we want to be happy, unlimited, basically is checkmated by our powerlessness. So one block is ignorance, second block is powerlessness, and the third block is scarcity. We don't have enough of the objects in this world to acquire and accumulate to keep us happy. So remember these three I's: ignorance, infirmity, and impoverishment. They will keep us, all our efforts, checkmated for achieving our goal that we want to achieve. Now what? So the world is not going to help us. So people turn to supernatural. When natural is no good, to make our goals come true, make our dreams come true, we head for the supernatural. And in the supernatural, well, we think of God, we think of so many other supernatural things that they will somehow help us become happy. Well, supernatural also cannot sometimes help us a lot. Like I mentioned, that well, what can you do hoping for supernatural? Wait for a destination where you will make it someday and then will be happy there ever after? No. Indian rishis, when I use the word rishi, this is a title. Think of it as a title of a very composite character or personality who is a scientist, who is a psychologist, who is a philosopher, and who knows a deal about human mind and consciousness. So Indian rishis took on this challenge head on, and using their deep reflection and a direct inquiry, a direct experience, they discovered certain truths about the existence, consciousness, and happiness. So now what we are going to do in the next few minutes is to discuss all those truths that are discovered by these rishis. And one such rishi, and Swami, I want to share with you, his name is Swami Bhajananada, who basically gave clarity to those thoughts and codified them in the 5 laws that I am going to discuss with you today. So according to Swami Bhajananada, but remember that all these thoughts are not original thoughts per se, they are all rooted in the Vedic thought, Vedic tradition and Vedic philosophy. So the first law goes like this. There is a reason that I am not using the PowerPoint slides. I want you to absorb everything. Otherwise that becomes like a laid back, okay, I can go back to the slides and then figure it out. No, don't worry about that. We'll make sure that everything that you want to take out from this class, you get it and it goes with you. So the first law is like this. And I think you read that first law in the announcement of the registration about the class. The first law says that every being, all beings, exist at different levels of consciousness. And you know it from your experience. Your spouse is at a different level of consciousness than yourself. Your friends, your boss, your children, your co-workers, everywhere you find, and you can immediately recognize that everybody is at a somewhat different level of consciousness. That's a fact that experientially you can verify. Second thing, the Swamiji says that all people exist at different levels of consciousness, and there is a definite and fixed degree of happiness attached to each level of consciousness. That is some kind of a revelation. If this sinks into your mind, think about it again. Everybody is at a different level of consciousness, and there is a definite and fixed degree of happiness at each of these levels. Now you can think of the fixed level of happiness, fixed degree of happiness like this. The planets in our solar system, they orbit in a kind of a somewhat fixed orbit. The electrons around the nucleus, they spin in a somewhat fixed orbit and some suborbits. Similarly, you can think about that this whole big universe is whirling around some center, and you can call it, if you choose to call it, a divine center. Think of a river. When we think of a river, what we think? We think it's a water course that is flowing from origin to the end. But that is just the visible part of the river. There is an invisible river also that we fail to notice sometime. And what is that invisible river? That invisible river is the vapor coming out of the ocean with the heating of the sun, and the winds carrying that vapor, and the clouds and falling as a rain all over the place. That is the invisible cycle of the river. Similarly, in the river called life, there is a visible life that we see from cradle to the grave, but there is an invisible part of the life also that is impelled by the movements and the inexhaustible power of the divine center that everything else is whirling around. And if you want to understand further about the fixed levels of degrees of happiness around each levels of consciousness, there is a scripture called Taittiriya Upanishad. It's a Vedantic thought, scripture of Vedantic tradition, and in that they describe that every human being has 5 what you call as sheaths, or the layers, or the sacks, whatever you want to call it. Have you seen an astronaut? They are wearing a space suit, but inside the space suit they are wearing so many other layers of clothing or whatever, protective gear. Similarly, human beings also have a different layers of, you can think of all those different layers. This Upanishad identifies these as 5 koshas. Kosh. I'll write the word for you here so that you can understand the pronunciation. This is a Sanskrit word and has a very nuanced meaning. It can mean treasure, it can mean a cover, it can mean a layer, and so on and so forth. But in the context of human personality, this you can think of as representing different levels of consciousness. Makes sense? Can we interpret it that way? And the scripture tells that there are 5 such koshas. From the smallest, from the lowest level, that is the level of anna. That is the food. The body that we see, that is the level of made by food, nurtured by food, and that is the one very basic level of our personality. Then there are 4 other levels. I will not name them right now, but just keep in the number 5 in your mind that there are 5 levels of consciousness based on this concept of panch-kosha. And think of these koshas also as some kind of a filter through which the bliss or the happiness that is represented by the Supreme Reality, it filters down in our experience. Those who are audiophiles and have used the graphic equalizer, they know that certain frequency bands you can select using different filters. Similarly, these koshas are like those filters that filter down the happiness that is coming from the source called Supreme Consciousness. And wherever, in whichever level of these koshas we identify ourselves, that basically determines our temperament and our personality. So if you think of a gross sensualist kind of a person, they are wholly identified with the first two lowest levels of the koshas, panch-koshas. That is the vital and the food. That is the annamaya and pranamaya. Now, what is the characteristics of these people whose I consciousness is identified at this level? Well, their happiness is solely, note my word, their happiness is solely derived from the contact of their senses with the external objects. Sounds abstract, but it's very simple. The only way for them to become happy is to make sure that there are certain objects in contact with their senses. That's all. Then you can think of, but the only downside of this type of happiness is that you derive, you cannot remain in contact with different objects forever. You wear down, one wears down. Then there are certain people who are of intellectual nature. Their I consciousness is identified at the third level, that is called the mental sheath or the mental layer of consciousness, mental sac of the consciousness. And once in a while these people slip down to the lower two koshas also. Finally, I know you are all spiritual seekers and there must be a question in your mind, what about a spiritual person? We know about the gross sensualist, where their consciousness is identified in the first two, intellectual type, the third level. And if you are a spiritual type, your I consciousness is identified at the fourth kosh, and that is called, I will write the word again here for your benefit. Okay, there is a different pen, I guess. That is called Vijnanamaya Kosh. Vigyan. So this is when our consciousness is raised to this level of Vijnanamaya Kosh. Why I am using certain technical Sanskrit words as they are, because these are non-translatables. There is no word in English or any other language that I understand of exists to rightly translate these words. So instead of doing a mistranslation and misguiding you, I am using the original words. So this is called Vijnanamaya Kosh. And now you don't land up there suddenly one morning and you wake up and say, aha, now I am at this level and I am a spiritual person. No, it never happens like that. We have to consciously shift our consciousness to that level. We have to make an effort, conscious effort to shift it there. Now, what happens? That we try to shift our consciousness there, and finally, we have to also now think about there is a definite and fixed degree of everything. Now, what can we do about it? Is there something more that can help us to become happy? We know that, well, this is fixed and there is nothing that can be done about it at this point of time. So there is a second law, and that is even more, if I can choose the word, horrible in the context of happiness. That will really kind of have a potential to scare a lot of people. The second law says that the degree of happiness that is attached to each level or sub-level of the consciousness is independent of any external event. Now you are totally helpless. Does it sink in, this thing, this law? The degree of happiness attached with each level or sub-level is totally independent of any external event. And that's why I objected to the word pursuit as a qualifier to happiness. Because you pursue something that is outside, external. You don't pursue something that is internal. So this second law is very important law. Means it sounds horrible, but it is very beautiful law. It tells you that what is the secret of karma yoga. Everybody heard that word, karma yoga? Well, Karma Yoga means basically you can think of the secret science of work. How you can use work as a great tool for your growth and progress. So, but let me just repeat in a different term the same law. So as long as I am stuck at a particular level of consciousness, the only happiness I am going to derive is that is appropriate to that level of consciousness, and nothing external can push it up. No matter how hard I try, this is not going to change. So you will say, well, it doesn't make sense. I told you to challenge every idea. Don't just take it on the face value what is being said here. Well, if you are sitting here in this room, you have some different experience. You could have been in a Bangla class. Next room, you could have a different experience. You could have been in a cooking class. You could have had a different experience. But note one thing. If everybody who is present in this class and that class is at the same level of consciousness, believe it or not, they are deriving exactly the same degree of happiness. It doesn't matter whether you are listening a lecture on happiness or dancing to the tune of Bollywood Bhangra. Your happiness is not going to change as long as you are stuck at a given level of consciousness. Does it sink in? Just say, aha, I got it. Alright, well, let me try to explain this with another example. Example of food. Everybody loves food. I love food. So, you go out eating for a Mexican food, for Italian food, for American food, for Punjabi food, for Gujarati food. Now you will say, I am eating all these different types of food. I am having different taste in my mouth. Right? Well, it doesn't matter that I am having a different taste, but as far as the happiness that is derived of eating, of the satisfaction that is coming out of eating, that happiness due to the appeasement of hunger will be same no matter which food I am eating. Right? Well, so choose your food carefully. And now you will say that, well, what about this fixed thing? I'm still puzzled about the fixed thing. Why this happiness is fixed? Well, like we see different, like we see in physical world, there are different physical constants. Like water boils at 100 degrees centigrade. There is no explanation for this. It is just a constant. Ice freezes at 0 degrees centigrade. No explanation, it's a physical constant. Similarly, so the inner world of a man also have certain constants. They cannot be explained away very easily. And the fixed degree of happiness is also one such inner constant that you can think of. So here is the problem. Now we know that nothing external is going to change that fixed degree of happiness commensurate with my level of consciousness. Then why do we work? Doesn't make sense, right? Why do we work? Nothing is going to change. The type of work that we do, the size of bank account, anything is not going to change that degree of happiness. And if your prime motivation is the happiness, then this is not going to work. But that's what the delusion that we live in. We think that changing the type of work by having a bigger car, bigger house, bigger bank balance, my happiness is going to somehow get a bounce. If we understand this law, that is a segue to the law of the principle of Karma Yoga. If we understand this law, second law of happiness, where a student becomes a better student, a teacher becomes a better teacher, a husband becomes a better husband, a wife becomes a better wife. Because then you know that everything that we are doing, all the work that we are doing just for the sake of enjoying or doing that work. Then our motivation and the purpose behind the work changes. So think about this, that work does not create happiness. Here the operative word is create. Like your ATM card does not create money, it just brings out whatever is in your bank account. So work does not create happiness, it just helps unfold the happiness that is already within. Okay, so now once we understand this, we stop grumbling about the type of work, we stop complaining about people, we stop complaining about our boss, we stop complaining about our teacher and all that thing. Suddenly the competition and the jealousy, it starts vanishing from our life, and then we do work just for the pure joy of doing that work. That's what in the one of the definitions of yoga says, and I'll quote Sanskrit and then translate it for you. It says, Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. The first word is yoga. What is yoga? Karma means the work, and Kaushal means the expertise or excellence. So excellence in performing the work that is in my hand at a given moment, that is the real yoga. When we start doing work with this understanding, then work becomes a very important aid in our spiritual growth. Alright, so now that will take us to the law number 3. And the third law is very simple. I asked the question, why you have to work? Nothing makes sense, everything external is not going to help. Well, here is the answer to that question, that we have to work to remove the obstacles to the happiness that is already within. Think of it like a bottled happiness. There is a cork sealing the bottle. You can't get the content of the bottle without removing the obstacle, that is the screw cork up there. So now the question is, what are those obstacles, and even before that, how you remove obstacle. I'll again take the example of a river. Example of a river, there is a river flowing, perennial source of water. Now you want to fetch water to yourself. What you will do, you will take a bucket, dip it into the water and take it out and then use the water. But the problem is, if we think that by dipping the bucket into the water, that action or that work created water, no, it did not create water. Did it? When you take a bucket, dip it into the river and take the water out, that action, that work did not create water. It only removed the obstacle called gravity, and then that work basically worked against gravity and helped you to get the water. So similarly, there is a perennial river of joy and happiness in the depths of our being that is flowing. Work is required to remove the obstacles that are stopping us, impeding us to experience that happiness that is already within. Still, there is one big problem to be solved: how to increase it. So, whenever we work with this idea that our work is to remove the obstacle from the path of happiness, from our experience of happiness, then that changes our whole attitude towards work. Complete attitude, it's a total turnaround. Magic starts to happen and the work becomes a important. 8 hours that we go to work every day, we are grumbling about it. Now think with this new attitude, that even that 8 hours is a paid time for your own spiritual growth, for whatever you are assigned to work, if we just bring a shift in our attitude. Right? So, now the question is, what are those obstacles that work is supposed to remove? Anybody can think of some obstacles that are stopping our experience of happiness? We can find several. You can fill a whole book. There are so many obstacles. But primarily, if you think, mostly these obstacles are our wrong emotional drives. Most of these obstacles are nothing but our wrong emotional drives, and they are powered and fueled by our selfishness. The selfishness is the very basic defect that causes most of our wrong emotional drives. So in order to uncover happiness, we have to either destroy this selfishness or at least lift some part of the veil of this selfishness to experience true happiness. So now we know the diagnosis of the problem. The diagnosis is that our happiness is impeded by our wrong emotional drives driven by the selfishness. Half the battle is won as long as they recognize this diagnosis. Second half is, what is the prescription, what is the cure, how we treat this? Well, working for others, serving others without expecting anything in return, that is selfless service. I'll repeat the word. That is where the theoretical, philosophical foundation of volunteerism comes in. Serving others without expecting anything in return. That is the best way, and for most of the people, the only way to overcome this limitation of selfishness. So, when we start serving others with this idea, that becomes a kind of work that will remove our obstacles, correct our wrong emotional drives, and then we can move on. How are you doing so far? 3 laws, 2 more to go. Everything making sense? Well, let me tell you this. This is not a class that you normally get on the PBS television by self-help gurus. Most of the PBS classes on self-help topics by New Age gurus, they pick up these Vedic Hindu ideas, plagiarize it, repackage it, recycle it, and pass it on, diluted and sometimes distorted, without even referencing to the source tradition, teacher, or the guru. So this is heavy duty stuff. I'm glad you signed up. I'm sure that when you walk out of this room after a few minutes, you will have something that you can really use in your day-to-day life. This morning when I was sitting for my puja and in my meditation, I kind of prayed to my Guruji, who taught me all this wonderful knowledge, wonderful stuff, and I told him that in this class, whoever is coming, please be with them as their personal coach, so that they can absorb the knowledge that you passed on to me, and I'm just working as a flow-through conduit so that it reaches them directly the right way that you want it to be. I'm sure sometime, somewhere, if something clicks in your mind, something you happen to like, believe it or not, my Guruji is helping you to understand and absorb those ideas. He is the YugaRishi, he is the Vedmurti, he is the embodiment in modern time of all the Vedic tradition and knowledge, and I was fortunate enough to learn with him. So that brings us to the 4th law, and that is very simple law. It says every human being has an urge to get higher and higher and higher and higher form of happiness. And you can validate it by your personal experience, right? Wherever you are, you want to get to a higher and higher and higher level of happiness. Does it sound like something you can relate to? That's why you are here in the class, because whatever you have, you want higher than that, so you wanted that. I will not be discussing about the categories of the different levels of these, the different forms of these happiness, grades of happiness, but they are like, they start with a very basic level, the happiness that you derive from the contact of senses with the external objects. Anything that is derived out of the contact with external objects cannot be continuous. It will wear you down, it will cause revulsion, and it will bring some kind of a satiety that you want a different experience. Now I'm done with that. That's why you get ever higher and ever twistier roller coasters, because one experience is satisfied, now you want something crazier. Right? So that level of, that grade of happiness is not that fulfilling. The second grade of happiness that comes from the joy of self-control. That is a voluntary forbearance. Okay, today I will not eat junk food. It will give you happiness if you follow it through. It did not come by the contact of your tongue with the food. It come by other way around. It is not the result of the activity of the senses. It is the result of refraining our senses from doing certain activity. I will watch no TV for a given day or whatever. That voluntary restriction and control on myself brings certain. I will spend that time talking to my spouse rather than watching the football game. Whatever it is. So this is the called Sham Sukh, or the happiness that is derived out of the voluntary restraint. So as a corollary, because it is not the result of the action or activity of the senses, it is longer lasting. It is longer lasting and it can be continuous. And one of the tools that helps in achieving this kind of happiness is devotion to the divine. Where our mind is devoted to the divine deities, divine being, divine center, that devotion basically withdraws our mind from the external objects, external world and senses, and we start settling down. The next higher grade of happiness, and again I have to use the original word for you, that is called Atma Sukh. Well, the word Atma, again, this is a non-translatable word, so I cannot really help you with that. But think of Atma as the higher self. And this grade of happiness, that is Atma Sukh, that is kind of pure joy of the higher self. And we cannot achieve this level of grade of happiness. Something very important, folks, here. We cannot achieve this grade of happiness by merely leading a moral life. Sometimes we get carried away with this notion that, well, I'm just leading a good moral life, I'm a good citizen and all that. Fine, that is a requirement, that is a precondition, but not sufficient condition to achieve this kind of happiness. Any conventional devotional exercise or practice that we know is also not sufficient to achieve this grade of happiness. Any membership into any social, secular or religious organization is also not sufficient condition to achieve this grade of happiness. Alright? You're with me? What is this then? This is the outcome of a real spiritual awakening. This happiness is the outcome. I was looking at that clock. Is it stopped? Oh, wrong clock.
I didn't realize that was wrong. Can we go 5 more minutes?
Okay, I can wrap it up in 5 minutes. That's fine.
We have another speaker coming in.
Yeah, that's all right. Okay. Well, watch for both the clocks then. Doesn't matter. You know what? Your happiness is independent of the clock. Okay, let me just wrap it up. So coming to this important concept that this higher grade of happiness, number one, all happiness is independent of anything external. Number two, this is independent of so many other things. That includes living a moral life, following conventional practices, of spiritual practices and membership of any. All right. So now that brings us to the fifth and final law, and I think that I can wrap up very, very quickly. So what can we do about it now? We are kind of stuck from all directions. We are at a given level of consciousness. That is, first law says that our level of consciousness is fixed. Our happiness is independent of anything external. Still, the fourth law says that we want more happiness. What is the solution? The fifth law is the solution, my friends. The fifth law tells us that in order to achieve higher forms of happiness, we have to bring about a corresponding shift in our level of consciousness. No shortcut, no, touchy-feely believing thing. It's a hard work. Otherwise, you are only in a waiting room, miserable, until you make it to some place what you believe in, and nobody has. I have not seen any report in the TripAdvisor from there how happy that place was or will be. Right? So, anybody who wants a higher degree of happiness, they have to bring about a corresponding shift in the consciousness, and this is your take-home technique for that. To bring about a shift in consciousness, hope is not a strategy. You have to use the right tools, you have to make the right effort, and you have to be ready for a long haul. Sincere, long haul aspiration, undiminished by no matter what the challenges are. This is what at least you can do to begin prepare to get onto that journey. Everybody wakes up in the morning, or depending on when you wake up is the morning. Okay, so when you wake up in the morning, while still in the bed, lying down, when you are alert, don't leave for a couple of minutes your bed. Just stay alert, relax, and think about this, that this new day that I am waking up is a new life, beginning of a new life for me. And think that this new life is just for one day. I have no guarantee that I will get it again, get another day, but I am gifted with this new life for one single day. That is today. Make a plan for your day, how best you can live that day, and thank the Divine for giving you a wake-up call. You woke up, you understood the privilege that you are blessed with, and then you have a plan now. Act on that plan. But remember these laws of happiness also. Don't go crazy about so many things. Okay? Because nothing external is going to change anything. What this fuss is all about? Just enjoy the plan. Execute the plan. Live the best you can. When the day ends, you are about to sleep again. Don't fall asleep right away. Nobody does, but when you are thinking about sleeping, which will never put you to sleep, but at least think this. At least think this, that this is the end of the day, end of the life that I was given, of one day of life. Thank the Divine, thank everybody, review your plan, and think that now your consciousness, which I call as Atma, is leaving your body. Imagine yourself separated from the body. This is the key to a spiritual life. Until we really realize that our body is different than ourselves, that life has not even begun. It's all woolly words. So, think that you are separating from your body like a real death experience. And when we do think about this every day, the fear of death goes away, and we realize our true identity, true nature, and we start planning accordingly. Thank you very much. Anything you like, you have two people to thank, to my Guru and to my wife Sangeeta. She told me, Sanjay, you better be good at it because I know I'm the fact checker of everything you talk about happiness. Alright, thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you all.